guys, good morning. What's up? My name is Menelito Mansueto. How are you today? Do you feel fine? Good? Alright. Welcome to our ethics class today. For today's discussion, we shall talk about ethical egoism. Like our previous topic, which is moral relativism, ethical egoism is another concept that is also posed as a challenge or challenging threat to our moral valuations. You can see that moral theories are also being challenged by certain adversary notions like ethical egoism and moral relativism. To give you a short recap, moral relativism is the view which claims that moral standards are relative or dependent upon one's own culture, society, tradition, upbringing, practices, historical periods, and personal preferences. Under moral relativism, ethical standards are therefore relative, as it is also subjective, dependent on the person who is speaking or performing the action. But before we start with today's topic, may I know if there are questions related to our previous discussions on moral relativism? There are no more questions? Okay, so let us proceed. Before we start, let us set our learning objectives for this topic on ethical egoism. Through this lesson, you should be able to do three things. First, understand the complexities of moral judgment and moral reasoning in setting a certain standard of moral basis or moral criteria. Second, examine the intricate difficulty of the concept of ethical egoism as to why it is deemed a threat to our moral reasoning. And third, explain and discuss to your peers the notion of ethical egoism with a critical reflections as the concept is applied to our everyday life and ordinary experiences. Our discussion this morning will follow this outline or questions. First, what is ethical egoism? Second, what are the proponents or who are the proponents of ethical egoism? Third, can ethical egoism really be possible? So we shall try to answer these three questions in our discussion. Now, on the first question, what is the meaning of ethical egoism? Ethical egoism is the view which claims that the sole basis of moral judgment should be the individual moral agent's own personal self-interest. So, egoism comes or derived from the word ego or self. Just to give you an example, a barangay captain who decides to hoard the relief goods allocated for his community is obviously selfish and unjust. No? So, the barangay captain is egoist because he wants to possess all the relief goods that are allocated for the whole community. Another example is maybe you experience to have your best friend. You have a best friend who only notices you before the recess time or before lunch break, but then after you paid for his meal, he no longer notices you. Yung mga tipong plastic na kaibigan, no? Medyo malalim ang hugot natin. You experience having friends who are there only when they need something from you. So, an ethical egoist will only consider the welfare of others only if it is also at the best of his own personal interest. So, what does this mean? Now, going back to our example, no, when the barangay captain decides to distribute the relief goods a little later after the pandemic to aid his political campaign, is being selfish to advance his own electoral candidacy. It will surely benefit the others, but for his own honor and credit. Baga, yung tipong siya ang bida, no? Siya ang, for example, he is going to repackage the relief goods and then rebrand with matching tarpaulin, no? Nilagyan pa niya ng salamat, thank you kay Cap, no? Na nag-donate nitong mga relief goods. So, what is an ethical egoist, no? So, in short, an ethical egoist is a person who is selfish and self-centered, no? In Tagalog, yung tinatawag na makasarili. In Bisaya, yung gitawag na to og hakog or laog. So, an ethical egoist, therefore, is not concerned or interested about the outcome or the consequence of his action to others, nor is he concerned about his duty and obligation toward God and others. He is ultimately concerned about nothing else but only of his own welfare and well-being. So, looking back at the broad distinction of teleological ethics and deontological ethics, in which teleological ethics is the kind of ethics that puts much emphasis and weight on the result, outcome, or the consequence of an action, whereas deontological ethics, on the other hand, is the kind of ethics that puts much emphasis on the concept of duty or obligation. So that means deontological ethics, prior to the action, you make your decision based on your knowledge prior to the action. But ontological ethics, on the other hand, your basis is on the possible result or outcome of the action. So, what do you think is ethical egoism? Is it teleological or deontological? Between the two categories. Ethical egoism belongs to the category of teleological morality, as it looks at the consequences of actions with regard to its benefits to the self. So, it is teleological. Now, we shall proceed on the second part, no? The second question regarding the proponents of ethical egoism. Let us see who are the philosophers that are proposing ethical egoism. We selected only a few of them. First is Henry Sedgwick. He was the one who introduced the term ethical egoism in his book, The Methods of Ethics, published in 1874. Sedgwick compared ethical egoism to utilitarian ethics, only that while utilitarianism sought to maximize overall pleasure of the majority, ethical egoism, on the other hand, is focused on maximizing the individual pleasure, specifically the self. So this is a difference, no? They are both teleological morality, but utilitarianism is focused on others or the majority of the society, whereas ethical egoists, on the other hand, is not concerned with the majority but with the self. There's a difference. Another philosopher that can be considered as proponent of ethical egoism is the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche, in his book on the genealogy of morality, suggests that egoistic behaviors are life-affirming and that it stimulates resentment or jealousy to others, and that Christian altruism is accordingly a product of envy against egoistic or egotistical behaviors. So altruism meaning it's the love towards others. So egoistic behavior is the basis for Nietzsche's master morality, in contrast to slave morality, which is highly dependent on other people. Master morality is somehow it is self-centered, individualistic. Third philosopher that we can consider as proponent, or actually who discussed the concept of ethical egoism, is Alasdair MacIntyre. No? In his essay Egoism and Altruism, as well as Nietzsche again in Beyond Good and Evil, have argued that ancient Greeks did not associate morality with altruism in the way that post-Christian Western civilization has done. In Aristotle, for instance, our duty to oneself is primary before our duties toward others. Fourth and the last philosopher on our list is the novelist Ayn Rand. In her essay, A Defense of Ethical Egoism, Rand have argued that happiness could be our way towards self-preservation and success, or individual success, in the pursuit of one's own interest. Rand's position could suggest that taking care of an ailing spouse could be detrimental towards individual happiness and self-preservation. Hence, leaving the spouse uncared for is justified. So, kumbaga, may sakit yung kabiyak mo sa buhay, yung partner mo in life, you are married for example, but then your better half, your significant other is for example bedridden or sick, no, that needs attention and delicate care, no. But then taking care of your partner, according to Rand, if it does not give you happiness, then you are not obliged to take care of your spouse. However, based on a study, based on interviews on those who decided to take care of their spouse, have pointed out that the reason they stayed is because of individual guilt that could also affect their own happiness. No? They would not want to be unhappy because of their guilt. So, not at all, no? Because this is based on case study. Hindi nila iniwan yung kanilang mga mahal sa buhay because they would be unhappy when they feel guilt. Now, on the third part, or on the third question, can ethical egoism really be possible? So I would say that at certain times and occasion, ethical egoism could really happen. It could occur. No? For example, in the distribution of relief goods, when there is not enough for everyone, when there is shortage of stocks or running out of supply, the tendency is really to prioritize ourselves or our dear loved ones. So that's why I'd say at certain occasion, because in real sense, if you are a consistent ethical egoist, when you become selfish all the time, the situation will be at your own disadvantage when it will be other people's turn to share their goods or supply. They would tend to exclude you since you are proven to be selfish and self-centered. They will then deprive you too of the goods that are supposedly allocated to you. So in the long run, ethical egoism is something not actually good or helpful to the individual. So it is proven that cooperation is still the best method for every community. In the Filipino sense, we have bayanihan, to help each other. We heroically do something for the other person. In Filipino philosophy, Leonardo Mercado calls this as loob, no? We find ourselves in the other. So that's why we care for others, because we treat others as ourselves, no? As ourselves, no? Like ourselves, no? Now let us try to connect ethical egoism with some political issues. No? So, for example, no, in the case of vote buying during elections time, no? When you vote for a certain candidate because you are paid and told to do so, you are acting for your own best self-interest of receiving the money or the prize money. If the candidate that you voted for turned out to be corrupt, as he steals money to recover his election expenditures, the vote seller, the voter, too, being part of the same community, is affected by the corrupt practices of the politician. It will be a boomerang, no? Or it will be a bad karma. No? Babalik din sa'yo yun, no? You vote for a corrupt politician, and then as a result, you are affected to the bad practices of the politician. Well, another example, President Rodrigo Duterte, prior to his election to presidency in 2016, he already laid down his cards in saying that don't vote for me because it's gonna be bloody. Wag ako, iba na lang. Yan ang sabi ni Duterte during the campaign period. No? Duterte is widely accused of EJK or extrajudicial killing. So when an electorate voted for Duterte, and we knew in fact that 14 million Filipinos voted for Duterte last presidential election, can we therefore say that 14 million Filipinos who voted for him acted only for their self-interest because it is their preferred candidate, regardless of the danger of the vigilante approach to eradicate illegal drugs? So are you being egotistical, or are you being ethically egoist, no? When you vote for a certain candidate upon the knowledge that, shall we say, that this person, as accused of him, is the one responsible for the vigilante killings. No? But on the other hand, one can also argue, one can also justify that the voters who voted for Duterte have also felt a certain moral call. No, a certain moral call to vote for Duterte. No, following his logic, Digong's logic, that the war on drugs is necessary for the bright future of our children. So you'll see that it's really very complicated scenario though. Now, going back to what Aristotle have said, that man is a political animal, or the common adage that say no man is an island, it is therefore impossible to separate the individual from the society. In one way or another, we always need the comfort of others, and that means that being selfish is not the way to go. Okay? So, the nature of human beings, no, especially from birth, we are the kind of animal that needs delicate care and nurturance. Unlike, say for example, cats, nung pinanganak ang cat, no, the kittens, maybe about 2 to 3 days, they're capable to walk around. But the case of human beings is not like that, no. We need the delicate care of a mother. So it's impossible to say that, di ba, no, to be consistent, ethical egoist is really impossible. That is my own personal take on ethical egoism. Do you have questions? Are there questions? I am now ready to respond to your comments and clarifications. So do not hesitate to ask questions. And thank you for listening to my discussion. Okay?